PseudoPod is extruded into this universe from a dimension of purest fear. It's beautiful in its own alien way, but what's to come will unsettle you.
PseudoPod, episode 696 for April 3, 2020. This week's story, The Fog by Morley Roberts. Hi everyone, welcome to PseudoPod, the weekly horror podcast. I'm your host, Graham Dunlop. Today's story first appeared in The Strand magazine in October 1908 and was collected in Midsummer Madness in 1909. It was written by Morley Roberts, 1857 to 1942, who was an English novelist and short story writer, best known for The Private Life of Henry Maitland, based on the life of novelist George Gissing. In his youth he travelled extensively and worked in the British War Office and other government departments. His first novel, The Western Avernus, was released in 1887, followed by many more, and he also wrote essays, biography, drama and verse, as well as work in biology. Your reader is Ant Bacon. Ant is an actor and voice artist from Manchester, England, where he lives with his husband Neil. He loves Lego, theatre, and has a mild obsession with Nigella Lawson. His professional credits range from television and theatre to podcasts and radio work. And now, my friends, we have a story for you, and we promise you it's true.
The Fog by Morley Roberts. Read by Ant Bacon. The fog had been thickening for many weeks, but now, moving like a black wall, it fell on the town. The lights that guided the world were put out. The nearest were almost as invisible as the stars. A powerful arc lamp overhead was but a blur. Traffic ceased, for drivers could not see. Screams were heard in the streets, and cries for help where none could help themselves. "I'm blind," said Tom Crabbe, as he leaned against the pillar outside the Café Francais in Regent Street. He said it with a chuckle, for he, alone of a street full of the lost, did not feel lost. "I'm blind, but I know my way home." Day by day, and night by night, he patrolled the streets with a placard upon his breast, marked with big letters, "Blind." People with eyes saw him. Out of 1,000, one gave him a penny. Out of 10,000, one gave him sixpence. The millionth, or some charitable madman, made it 1/2 crown. The red-letter day of his blind life was when he found a sovereign in his palm, put there by a soft little hand that touched his. He heard a gentle girl's voice say, "Poor blind man." He had a hard life, and was a hard and lonely man, but he remembered that voice, as he did all voices. As he stayed by the pillar, a man stumbled against him and apologised. "That's Mr. Bentley," said Tom Crabbe. "Who are you?" "I'm Blind Crabbe, sir, bless your heart. You've given me many a copper, haven't you?" Bentley was a chauffeur and engineer. He drove for Lord Gervase North, the balloonist and motor racer, and was forever about the West End and Regent Street, as Lord Gervase often dined at the Francais. "To be sure, I know your voice," said Bentley. "It's an awful night, Crabbe." "Must be," said Crabbe. "But fog or none, it's the same for an eyeless man. To hear the folks, it might be the end of the world, sir." "There was never such a fog," replied Bentley. "It's just awful. I can't see you. No, nor my hand in front of my face." "You can't get home then? Why, what are you doing?" "I've come for my boss and the lady he's to marry. They're dining here with her mother. But we'll never make it home." "Bentley?" called a voice. "Yes, my lord," said the chauffeur. "What are we to do?" "Don't know, my lord." "Can we get a hotel?" "They're Crammed already, I hear, my lord. Crab put out his hand and touched Bentley. Where does he want to go? Perhaps I could lead you. It was a strange notion, but then the blind know their way. Aye, perhaps you could. The ladies live in Eccleston Square, and my lord in Point Street. I don't know either of them, but I could take them and you to your place. My place? Said Bentley. Then his master spoke. Who's that with you, Bentley? A blind man, my lord. He thought he might take you all home, but he doesn't know Eccleston Square. All he knows is my place. Better be there than in the street, said Crab. He had a sense of power in him. All of the rest of the world were blind. He alone had some sight. If the hotels are full, we must go somewhere, said Lord Gervase. There's no room here nor a bed. They want to shut up now. I'll speak to the ladies. Good bloke that, said Crab. He gave me a shilling once and said a kind word. The darkness was thicker than ever. It was incredibly thick and choking. It made the useless eyes ache. It was a threat, a terror. So might the end of the world come. Bentley, said Lord Gervase once more. Yes, my lord. Come here. Bentley found him, and his employer put his hand on his shoulder. Can you trust this man? If so, the ladies will come to your place till it clears, if you will take us in. My wife will do her best, my lord. I know this Crab to speak to. He says you gave him a shilling once. I'm sure he'll lead us right. But what about the car? You must leave it, or get him to bring you back. I want you with us. Come, Lady Semple. Come, Julia. The mother and daughter, who had been close behind him, moved timidly. Let me lead her ladyship, said Bentley. Thank you, Bentley, said Lady Semple. There was a painful note in her voice. She was never strong, and the fog alarmed her. Julia clung to her lover and did not speak. Crab, take us to my place then, if you can, said Bentley. I'll give you a fiver if we get there all right, said Lord Gervase. You gave me a shilling once, my lord, and after that I'd take you for nothing, said Crab. 'Tisn't often I get so much. He led the way, and Bentley took hold of his coat. Keep close, all of you, said Crab. The circus is packed terrible, and if I can get across Piccadilly, 'twill be easy. They were on the west side of Regent Street and went down Eyre Street into Piccadilly. Out of the darkness, wandering folks came and met them. Some wailed, some asked for help, some seemed dazed or half mad, as all folks get in deep fog. Every now and then there was a crash of glass. They came to Piccadilly and heard the trampling of horses. People in carriages spoke. The darkness was a visible, awful darkness, and in it a mad world was buried. Here is the way across to Eagle Place, said Crab. But can we get across? It was a passage of such peril as might be found in war, or upon an unknown mountain in heavy snow, or in a wreck upon a reef of sharp rocks. They heard the dreadful cry of a hurt man. Crab's foot came upon one who lay on the pavement. He was dead, or so Crab believed, when he stooped and felt him. I've seen many dead when I was soldiering in India, said Crab. Julia trembled to hear him say so. There were many people in the street. Some were drunk, many wild, but most were fearful. Yet the darkness released some of the fear and let loose their devilry. It seemed that two men in front of them smashed every window as they passed and laughed wildly. Once Julia called out, and her lover said, "What is it?" "Did you kiss me, Gervase?" There was horror in her voice. He had not kissed her. "My God," said Gervase, "my God!" There was a strange laugh in the darkness. He leapt at the laugh, caught it by the throat, and dashed the laughter on the pavement. And Julia's cry brought him back to her. But they crossed at Duke Street and wondered how they did it. "Now it's easy," said Crab. "We're as good as there, my lord." In St. James Square there were few people, and they rested. Julia spoke again. Did you Did you hurt him?" But Crab heard her speak. "Who spoke?" he said suddenly. "'Twas Miss Semple spoke," answered Bentley. "Young lady, did you ever give a poor blind man a sovereign?" asked Crab in a strange, far-off voice. "Yes, once, many years ago," said Julia, wondering. "And you said, 'Poor blind man.'" "God bless you, miss. I knew your voice just now," said Crab. "'Twas the 5th of July 5 years ago. I never forget a voice." He went on in silence, and led them by way of Pall Mall and the square down Whitehall and Parliament Street, going through many perils, till the Houses of Parliament were on their left and the Abbey on their right. "We're close now," said Crab. "'Tis strange should be the same to me as any other night. Is it better now?" "It's worse," said Bentley gloomily. But they came to the stairway of the flat that Bentley lived in. "Is this it?" asked Bentley in surprise. He could see nothing. "You live here, or I'm a fool," said Crab. "I've led you straight. Go up and see." On the first floor his flat was, and Bentley's young wife opened the door and cried out as she took hold of him. "A blind man led me, dear," said Bentley. "And we've brought Lord Gervase north, and Lady Semple and Miss Semple. They cannot get home. We must keep them till tomorrow, when the fog goes." So Shadow spoke to Shadow, and she whom they could not see spoke to them and bade them welcome in a trembling voice, and found chairs for them. But Bentley and Lord Gervase went out again to Crab, who took his £5 gratefully. "Will this fog last?" asked Lord Gervase. But none could answer. Ere Crab went off to his solitary house close by, Bentley said to him, "If the fog's like this tomorrow, come in and see us, Crab." They shook hands, for the danger brought them close, and Crab went off, murmuring to himself. Bentley went back upstairs again, and it seemed to him that the fog was thicker still. In the room was lighted darkness, and the lamps showed the night feebly. "There never was such a fog," he said cheerfully. But Lady Semple moaned and shed tears, and nothing they could say consoled her. To be in her own home in such a fog would have been bad enough, but to be here? Poor Mrs. Bentley, only lately married, was terrified to think that she had 3 such folks to deal with. But she had some sense and some energy in her. She took her husband aside. The Thompsons are away," she began. These people lived in the opposite flat on their landing. "Why shouldn't we break in there and take their beds for these ladies?" "Break in?" cried Bentley. "Suppose they come back? They've been gone for a week, and how can they come back in this fog? Besides, what can we do?" "It's a notion, after all," said her husband. "I'll propose it to his lordship." As a result of the proposal, he and Lord Gervase put their heads and shoulders together and turned housebreakers inside 5 minutes. They lighted fires and lamps and mitigated the horrid darkness as much as they could, and sent Lady Semple and Julia to bed. Mrs. Bentley soon followed, and left her husband and his employer together. "This is a queer situation, Bentley. I wonder if it will last," said Lord Gervase. "It's a rum start, my lord," replied Bentley. "And to look at it, it might last forever. Then what will become of London and of us?" "We'll have to leave in your balloon, my lord," said Bentley with a grim laugh. "But let's hope it'll be better in the morning." Lord Gervase slept in Bentley's spare room, and slept soundly. When he woke, it was pitch dark. He looked at his watch by the light of a match, and could not discern the figures. It seemed as if he were blind. But on opening the watch, and feeling the hands, he found it was 8 o'clock in the morning. The fog was worse than ever. The gloom that was outside settled on their hearts. They had breakfast together, and hardly spoke. Lady Semple continually cried, and Julia could hardly restrain her own tears. "It's like the end of the world," sobbed Lady Semple. We shall die of it." In truth, Mrs. Bentley wondered where food was to come from if it continued. She had nothing left after breakfast but a loaf of bread, and they could not see each other. When they opened the window, the outside fog was as thick as a black blanket. It inspired a helpless, hopeless horror. They sat about until nearly noon and said nothing. At 10, Crab came to the outer door and knocked. When they let his dark shadow in, he put something on the table. "It's grub," he said. "I thought you might want it." He came to them from the outer world, and they asked him for news. "Things are awful, my lord," he said quietly, but there was a strange ring in his voice. "They're awful. I can't tell you all that's going on. 'Tis madness. There are awful things being done, fires, murders, and horrible screams about. I was in Trafalgar Square, and folks cried out suddenly, 'Light! Light!' Something broke in the fog overhead, and a great light shone. People cried out, and then the fog came down again. Terror's in us all, but many have broken into liquor shops and are drunk. The whole town's mad." "Oh, will it last?" asked Julia. "What do the papers say?" "There were no papers. There was nothing," said Crab. "The very electric lights were out. It seemed no one worked. No one could work. There was a blind mob in the streets, and all were lost. They sought to escape. They knew not which way to run." When he had finished, Lady Semple fainted, falling into her daughter's arms. Julia and Mrs. Bentley took hold of her, and Crab and Bentley and Lord Gervase went apart. "What's to be done?" asked Lord Gervase, in a kind of despair. "Nothing but wait, my lord," said Bentley. "Could you lead us out of London, Crab?" asked Lord Gervase. "I don't know more than my beat and a bit over," said Crab. "What I know like the inside of my hat, but beyond it there's a sort of blackness for me. But I'll get you food." "How did you get what you brought?" asked Bentley. "Out of an open shop," said Crab. "There was a dead man in it." They said nothing for a time. "Folks are going mad and jumping into the river," said Crab. "And I heard a woman shrieking awfully. Wicked people are about. There's fires already here and there." "What can we do?" asked Lord Gervase. "It can't last," said Bentley. "Why can't it?" asked Crab after a pause. "It might last a week, eh?" said Bentley. Or more?" "Where's London's food to come from?" "Where are folks going to find it?" asked Crab. "In 3 days they'll be eating each other." "I heard horrid things said in the dark by blind voices, my lord. They gave me shivers and shakes." "Where's that balloon, Bentley?" asked Lord Gervase in a shaken voice. "Could we use it? We must get Lady Semple out of this. We must, or she will die." It was in a store close by the gasworks, but Bentley couldn't find it. Crab said he knew the gasworks if Bentley could find the place in which the balloon was. "But what will you do with it, my lord?" "Go up in it and out of this and drift away," said Lord Gervase. "It could be done." "Will there be any gas left?" asked Bentley, and then he clapped his thigh as if he'd thought of something. "What is it, Bentley?" "There'll be none working at the gasworks, my lord." "Crab and I will go down and turn off the supply if we can," said Bentley. "Turn it off before it's gone." "Do it," said Lord Gervase. "This is horrible. My eyes ache. It's driving me mad. Poor Julia." "Will you help me, Crab?" asked Bentley. So they went out together, and passed murder in the streets, and saw the glare of fires, and heard awful things. And Bentley was blind, but Crab had eyes in his mind. So at last they came to the works, and smote on the door to see if by happy chance there were any there. The watchman came running. He had lost his nerve, and cried as he held to them, telling them how the men had left him all alone. But he lived there, and they had their homes elsewhere. "What gas have you left?" they asked him, and when he could answer, he said that one gasometer was half full, but that it went quickly. "Come and turn it off so that it won't waste any more," cried Bentley. And they turned it off, knowing they brought bitter darkness to many. But Crab said he would bring food to the watchman, and he was easier in his mind. "London's being destroyed," said the watchman. "I hear dreadful things." "Dreadful things are being done," said Crab. But dreadful things are always being done, my lad. I'm not so blind I can't see that. This is blindness, said the watchman. I can't smoke even. It's dreadful. Shall we all die? Some day, said Crab. I can see that. And he and Bentley tried to find the store where the balloon was, and, in trying, Crab once got lost and said so. Bentley's blood ran cold, for Crab was his sight, his life, and the life of those he loved, for he loved not only his wife, but Gervase North and Julia Semple, since they were made to be loved, both of them, and Bentley was kind-hearted. Yet Crab found himself again, and they went back to the square without discovering the balloon shed. We'll try tomorrow, said Crab. They tried next day, and failed. They tried the next day, and still failed. But Crab brought them food, very fine food, wonderful things in pots and jars. I went up to Piccadilly and smashed a window for 'em, said Crab. God's truth, I did. I hope they're good. Is it too dark to see? They too had no gas. We can taste, they answered. But they tasted fog. Fog thick, yellow, a pasty fog. And they tasted horror, for there were lamentable voices in the streets, voicing death and murder. What's this in the bottom of the sack? Asked Bentley, when he had taken out the last of the jars and fine glasses of preserved foods. Jewels, I think, said Crab, in a strange voice. I thought the ladies might like 'em. I found 'em on the pavement in an open bag. By the feel of 'em, I thought they might be diamonds. And I passed another shop and smashed the window and grabbed a handful. Why not? Who wants 'em? London's dying, but you've your balloon. Again a heavy silence fell on them. Crab went away. He wanted news, he said. So he went lightly through the gloom, the pace of darkness and night. London was like the pit. It was silent, but in the silence were cries. Horses lay dead. Others wandered loose. There were fires in the streets, made of smashed vehicles. Gloomy shadows burned themselves, and cooked horseflesh by the leaping hidden flames. Some danced drunkenly and fell into the fires. Many offered golden loot for food, jewels for a mouthful, and went about hunting. They said, voices said, that the river was thick with floating corpses already, and fires increased. Out of the night came the mad shrieks of women and the wildest laughter. Dying men played with death and fell on fire and crime and the awfulest disasters. Some went madly crying for their wives and daughters, their little children and their old people who were lost. In churches they prayed. A blind organist made mad music to heaven in a church that Crab passed. For him a madman blew. "'Tis an awful strange world," said Crab. "Darkness fell on me years ago, but this city's blind." Some he spoke to were quiet and some wild. They told him rumours, the strangest. It was wonderful how rumours went in the dark. Wild crowds were marching east and west and south and north, or trying to march. But few had any guidance. 'Twas said one man had a compass and led 1,000 to the river, and there fell in. The parks were full of wanderers. Rich people offered thousands from windows, and were slain for money that the slayers could not find. One man lighted a fire with banknotes. A voice said that men were in the bank, in all the banks, stealing the sacks of gold. The pavements were slippery with a thick fluid, and the dead lay everywhere. Folks drank at the river and fell in. They threw themselves from windows and fell on blind wanderers. The railways were quiet. Nothing moved there. Ships were deserted in the lower river. The telegraphs were quiet. Men fled from them. The telephone exchanges were empty. The outside world had deserted London and cut it off. It was sunk in a pit. It lay at the bottom of a well. And these things Crab gathered up and, going back to his friends, told them. But he brought them food, and they ate in the darkness. He took them wine, and they drank in the night. And they lost count of the days and the nights. But every day or night, Bentley and Crabbe sought for the place where the balloon was stored. On the 10th day, they found it. That day, Lady Semple seemed near death. With infinite labour, though they had the help of the watchman, they took the balloon to the gasworks, and then Lord Gervase came with them, leaving Julia with her sick mother. "It's our only chance, my darling," he said as he left her. He kissed her in the darkness, and kissed the dying woman, for indeed, unless they got her out of the darkness, she was dead, and went away with Crabbe and Bentley. With blind eyes they worked. Their eyes ached and saw nothing. Their hearts laboured, for the air was thick and foul, and even fouler and thicker since the fires of the town grew by the folly and madness of lost men. And once again for an hour it grew lighter overhead. They saw each other. Then the darkness fell again. With the help of the watchman, now their slave and the slave of Crabbe, who did the work of many and was the calmest of all, they started the inflating of the great balloon. In the blackness of things, they had to use infinite care lest they should wound the gigantic ship which was to save them. Yet at last the monster commenced to grow wonderfully, like a huge toadstool in the night. As it grew, it straightened out the gear, and they felt its proportions and recognised this and that, and felt easier. "We shall get out," said Lord Gervase. He yearned to live. He was young and loved a woman, and the world was big for him and fine, but he found Bentley a bigger man than himself, and Crabbe was bigger than either, though he'd been no more than a soldier, wounded in a foolish fight in far-off India. He gave them courage to drink. He held up their hearts, for he loved the voice of Julia Semple, and remembered her gift, and was glad to help her and her lover. "You shall want for nothing after this, Crabbe," said Gervase. "I shall want much or little always," returned Crabbe, in a strange exultation, for he had never loved a woman until now, though he had kissed many, and her whom he loved he could never kiss. The world outside was not their world. They were lost in London, in the darkness. They were cut off. But the balloon grew and grew, and then it ceased to grow. There was no more gas. That night it was a little lighter, for it was night, though they knew it not, and the 4 men laboured in the works, and set the retorts going, and made more gas. Crabbe was a man of strength, and now he grew more strong. He helped them up, and laboured, and made the watchman, who was a poor creature, do all that he should do. He made them feel brave. This is the gift of the strong, the gift by which men know them. And at last the balloon stood up and tugged upon its ropes, made fast to an old boiler in the open space. "It will carry how many?" asked Crabbe. This was a thing no one had asked. It was a great balloon, built for a special race and for purposes of science, but it would not carry them all, and they knew it. Lord Gervase whispered to him, 5 at most, Crabbe. Including the watchman, they were 7. "I'll stay, my lord," said Crabbe. "I can get by on myself, as you see." "You're a brave man," said Lord Gervase. He was more than a brave man, this poor blind fellow. But for him, what would they have done? By now they would all have been dead. Through him, they had one chance. But if Crabbe stayed, who was the other to be? They fought it out that night in the flat among the 3, Lord Gervase, Crabbe and Bentley. The women stayed apart in another room, where some feared Lady Semple was dying. "I'll stay with those who can't go," said Crabbe. They understood him. He could live. For him it was not dark. He had, as he said, eyes, and his strong and quiet mind could endure the horrors of which he told them. They knew he'd never told them half, but their minds told them the rest. "Let it be so, Crabbe. You've saved us," said Lord Gervase. "When this is over, ask what you like, and you shall have it." "I'll stay with Crabbe, sir," said Bentley. He too was brave, but his heart sank as he spoke. "Your wife must go, then?" "She must," said Bentley. "What about the watchman?" asked Crabbe. "If I stay, he can go," said Bentley. "He's helped. But for him, we couldn't have filled the balloon." Let him go, Bentley called to his wife. She came from the other flat and went to his voice and leant upon him while he told her what they meant to do. She was a young girl still, no more than 19, and her soul was her husband's in this hour. "I'll stay with you, Will." They could not move her, for when they spoke urgently, she laughed at them in scorn. Every reason they urged for her safety was one for her man's. "I'd rather die with him. Don't say any more. Let the watchman go," she said. Bentley kissed her in the darkness, which was lighted for him by her faith and love, and she wept upon his heart. "Take poor Lady Semple out of this place quickly," she said, "or she will die." They knew it was the truth. Lord Gervase spoke. "Then it's Lady Semple and Miss Semple, myself and the watchman. Yet the balloon might carry 5. It's a pity." "So much the better chance for you, my lord," said Bentley. The higher they could rise, the greater chance there was of getting an air current to carry them away from London. But they knew there might be none. "Lose no time," said Crabbe. He was the strongest there. They needed a strong man, for if the fog could be worse, it was now worse indeed. The heavy smoke of many fires ran along the ground. Nothing but the calm that destroyed them kept them here from being destroyed. "Let's go now," said Crabbe. He carried Lady Semple to the works in his arms, and as they went, she spoke to him. "Save my daughter, Crabbe. I shall never get out alive." "Oh, we'll save you both, and all of you, my lady," said Crabbe cheerfully. "Oh, it's dreadful," she moaned. "Am I blind, Crabbe? I see nothing. Nothing. I choke." "You'll be in sunlight. God's sunlight in half an hour, my lady," said Crabbe. "Up above this, there's light. There must be, think of it. Fine sunlight shining such as I've not seen in 10 years, since I saw it out in India. It is the sun up there, my lady. I remember shining temples, gold and marble. Oh, yes, there's sunlight up above." They came to the works and entered. The watchman greeted them nervously. "You must take me, gentlemen. You must take me," he cried fearfully. "Shut up," said Crabbe. "You're going to be taken. Don't act the cur." But the watchman was half mad. There were thousands mad that hour in London, and tens of thousands would be. Yes, there was sunlight up above, said Crabbe. Oh, the brave man he was. Could there be sunlight? Or had the sun been put out? They laid the sick woman in the car, and she rested her head upon Julia's knee. The watchman held to the basket work and leapt in hurriedly, but Gervase North spoke to Crabbe and Bentley. "Stay here if you can, Crabbe. You, Bentley, go back to your wife. She'll be lonely. You're both brave men, the bravest. I feel a cur to leave you. But you stay, Crabbe. If there's no wind up aloft, we shall come down here. Here. You understand?" They understood and shook hands. "I'd like to shake hands with Miss Julia, my lord," said Crabbe, in a queer, strained voice. Yes, yes," said Lord Gervase. So Crabbe spoke to the girl. "Will you shake hands, miss?" Julia cried softly. "Oh, yes. You're a brave man." "You said years ago, poor blind man," said Crabbe. He kissed her hand gently. "Goodbye, miss." Gervase was in the car. "You can let go, Crabbe," he said. "Goodbye, Bentley." "Goodbye, Crabbe." "Good luck, and God's sunlight to you all," said the blind man. He and Bentley let the rope run slowly, easing it off round a heavy pipe of iron that lay on the big boiler. "I'm at the end of the rope," said Crabbe. "Stand clear, Bentley." "Goodbye, sir." "Goodbye, miss." The balloon was invisible, the car unseen. The world was blank and awful. "Let go," said Gervase. He heard a far, dim voice below him cry, "Goodbye," and they knew the earth had dropped away. He grasped Julia's hand. Lady Semple fainted, and was quiet. The watchman laughed, but Gervase looked up. Above him he saw something, a dimness, a blur, a space. It was almost black, but visible. It was brown, it was yellow, and then grey. There was a dash of wonderful blue in it, and they shot out into a magic and intolerable day of noon. The sun shone upon them, and far below lay a wonderful cloud with sunlight on it. And the watchman giggled strangely. Julia shrank from him and held out her hand to her lover. They saw each other once more. Their sight was their own again, but Gervase was grimmed with the labour he had done, and she hardly knew him. Even his voice was strange. "Thank God! It's wonderful," she said. He bent and kissed her. "My dearest," he answered, and Lady Semple moaned and woke. "Where am I?" she asked. "In the daylight," said Gervase. "The poor men who were left," cried Julia. She had never seen this crab with her eyes. She only knew him as a big shadow, a voice that was strong and yet trembled when he spoke to her. She knew he was a hero, and knew, as women must know, that he loved her. He was in the darkness beneath them. But how wonderful the world was! The sun was glorious, the heaven above a perfect blue. The far cloud below them was white, and yet in places a strange dun colour. It heaved and moved and rose and sank. Out of it came strange pillars of yellow clouds. "What are they?" asked Julia, pointing into the void. "Fires," said her lover. He wondered if the balloon moved, and could not see that it did. There was no speck of cloud above them to say if the air moved. Far away from the city, to the east and the west, they saw a shining gleam of the river. The great cloud rested only on the town. They saw far-off blue hills, and the far, far country adorned with happy little towns. Wraith lay only on the city. Far away was peace. The lower river was full of ships. The outer world wondered at the end of things. They rose no further. They did not move. Gervase grasped Julia's hand. "You're brave, my dear." It was a question, and she knew it. "What is it, Gervase?" "We don't move, Julia, neither up nor away from here." "What does that mean?" She saw now how grave he looked. "What does it mean?" "You're brave, and will be," he said. So she understood. He knew the balloon was slowly sinking. Perhaps there was a little leak in it. They came slowly, very slowly from the heights. But still the watchman chuckled, for he watched no longer. The golden cloud heaved close beneath them. "We're going down," said the lovers. It was as though a ship sank in a turbid sea. A little grey cloud gathered about them. The sun lost its golden clear sharpness, and the watchman saw it, and watched, and ceased to laugh. "Do we go down again, sir?" he asked. "Aye," said Gervase. Lady Semple heard him, but saw nothing. The light of day grew dim. It was as though night fell about them. The sun went out, and darkness gathered wherever they sank. They breathed uneasily, and sank into the blackness. Down below, Crab waited, quietly wondering. He had taken Bentley home and come back to the works by himself. He sat, quiet as a stone, hoping, happy and unhappy. She was, at any rate, in sunshine. He thanked what gods there were for that. The time went. Perhaps a wind blew high up in the sunlight. As he waited, he heard a little sharp cry, like that of a bat. Then suddenly a rushing sound, and the flat sound of something striking earth, not many yards from him. It was horrible, for what fell was soft, humanly soft, and he knew it. He groped his way to where the thing fell, and his hands were wet when he touched it, and his heart failed him. But he felt again. He knew it was a man. It had been one, not a woman. He felt a beard. It was the watchman. He sat down by the body, by the wreck of the body, and wondered, had Lord Gervase thrown him out? That was possible. Anything was possible. Or perhaps the man had gone mad. He knew he was unbalanced. There were few wholly sane in the great city. But if the balloon had been coming down, it must have ascended again. "I'll wait," said Crabbe. How long he waited he did not know. No clocks chimed. He had no sense of the hours. There was no light for him, or for any. But at last, he heard a far, dim voice. It was not in the street, for now none came there, or if they came, they cried lamentably. No, it was far above him. The next moment he heard the faint, light impact of the car, heard it rebound lightly and come down again, not 20 yards from where it had ascended. "Is that you, my lord?" he asked. A voice within 2 yards of him answered, "Yes, Crabbe. I'm sorry, my lord." "Can't be helped," said Gervase. "Did you hear anything fall, Crabbe?" "Aye, my lord." The watchman went mad and jumped out. We rose again, but sank once more. "There's no wind up there, Crabbe." "Lady Semple's dead, Crabbe." Crabbe heard Julius Semple weeping quietly, but he found a sheet of iron and dragged it over the hollow in which the man's body lay, before he went to the car. "Make fast the ropes, Crabbe," said Lord Gervase. Then they lifted Julia and her dead mother from the car. They lay the body apart. "God help us," said Gervase. "Where's Bentley?" "With his wife," said Crabbe. "We must keep the balloon full and try again," said Gervase. Crabbe brought Bentley, and his wife came with him. The men fired the retorts and made more gas with infinite labour. Once more the balloon, which had become limp and flaccid, stood up boldly. There were 5 of them left. The car could carry 5, but even with 4 they had done nothing. Before they did anything else, they buried Lady Semple and heaped earth upon the battered watchman. They thought then that it was day. "We must go," said Gervase. Crabbe stood apart once more, but Julia Semple spoke. "Let Crabbe come." "Oh, no, miss. You must come, or I will not go." She took the blind man by the arm. "Yes, Crabbe, we owe everything to you," said Gervase. "I'll come then," said Crabbe. His voice was strained. They remembered it afterwards. Some folks have gifts in their voices. They mark the power of their nature, the strength of them. Before they went up, they lighted the car of every superfluous thing and cut away the guide rope. They took little food with them and even cast away their boots. "It's our last chance, Bentley," said Lord Gervase. "We can't make more gas," Crabbe says. They got into the car again. "I'll cut the rope, my lord," said Crabbe. "Aye," said Gervase. "Are we ready?" "Yes." Crabbe cut the rope and they rose, but overhead the darkness was intense. "We came through black and dun and yellow and grey before," said Gervase. "And then the light. The light." Now they breathed again and saw a faint greyness, and then stars sparkling suddenly in the deep, dark blue, and far away to the west a thin, thin moon. It was night, the dark hour before the dawn. Towns shone with lights far below them, sparkling on the horizon. "It's night still," they said. Even as they spoke, they saw in the east a little grey flame of dawn, a faint whiteness, a growth as of a lily opened. "There's the day. I wish I could see it," said Crabbe. "Poor blind man," said Julia, and she pressed his big hand. "That's better than gold, missy." "Oh, if I could see your face," said Crabbe. "I've never seen yours," she said softly. But the dawn rose like a magic palm in the desert. There was gold in the flame of it, and a heart of gold, and the upper limb of the sun grew out of the east, and she saw Crab at last. Grimed though he was, she saw a strangely carved face, which was very calm and strong. The lids upon his sightless eyes were full and hid them. His mouth was like that of some strange Egyptian. It had power in it, and resolution. "I see you now, Crab," she said to him. The others looked at the dawn. Mrs. Bentley wept softly. "If I could only see you. May I touch your face, Missy?" She raised his hands to it, and he felt its sweet, soft contours. "You must be very beautiful," he murmured. Then he said to Lord Gervase, "Do we still rise, my lord?" "I think so, Crab," Gervase answered. "Look up, my lord. Is there a cloud above us?" High in the zenith, there was a faint wisp of vapour in a cool current. "That cloud above moves, my lord," said Bentley. "We don't move," said Gervase dully. "'Tis 1,000 feet above us." "Can we cast anything out?" said Crab in an eager voice. They cast out some clothes, aye, some food and water. "It's not enough," said Gervase, "but there's a strong current high above us." "Oh, there's enough," said Crab. But they only stared at him. "You're blind, Crab." "I can see things," said Crab. "I see if we go down, we shall not rise again. I see that, and more." He bent his head to Julia. "You see me, Missy? Will you remember me?" "Oh, yes, Crab." He stood up and held the edge of the car. "Sit down, man!" cried Bentley. But he stared at the warmth of the sun, which fell upon his pallid cheek. "Oh, the sun's good, though I cannot see it. And I've a sense of light in me. Goodbye, Missy." He said that to Julia, and ere they knew what he did, he threw himself from the car. They saw his body fall, and Julia shrieked vainly. He fell into the cloud, but the balloon rose and entered the great wind of the upper air, and the heavy cloud below them slipped into the east.
What a strange little story. A fog descends upon London, no explanation is given and no discovery of why is made. A very few manage to escape and we're not told what happens to them. Did they make it? Did their balloon lose height again? Did they get to those hills they saw? We don't know. And we don't need to know, because this story is about what happens to people in crisis. When faced with something sudden, unexpected and relentless, what do people do? Do they care only about themselves, or do they reach out and help those around them? This story is rather uncomfortable at a time like this, isn't it? Because we are seeing some of this played out in the world around us. People fighting for toilet paper. Why? People hoarding and stockpiling. People ignoring safe guidelines and crowding together at the beach. This is not a phrase I use often, but such behaviour sickens me. It's a dog-eat-dog, everyone for themselves mentality which is hurtful, nihilistic and destructive. That's the true horror in this story. Being alone, friendless, and at the mercy of forces you can't control. And yet, as in the story, we see acts of great kindness and ingenuity. Our heroes work together to get the best outcome they can in the situation. They search for the balloon repeatedly, over and over until they find it. They fill it with gas. That runs out, they make more. They lighten the load and cast off, and when that first attempt fails, they try again, until in the end, success. Not without cost, to be sure, but success. We see great efforts being made to mitigate the current situation. The work of those in the public eye is true heroism indeed. Medical staff, first responders, scientists and researchers working towards a vaccine. Heck, people who work in supermarkets and chemists. With my software engineering background, I greatly admire those using their skills to mitigate the effects of the virus. For example, those working on an open source, low-cost ventilator using 3D printers. And of course, the simple kindness of friends and family keeping in contact to know how you're doing and whether you need help. Folks, I really didn't mean to make this a sermon, but I shall wrap up here with a quote I've heard a lot lately on my favourite podcast, my second favourite podcast, Kermode and Mayo's Film Review. It will be all right in the end. And if it's not all right, it's not the end. We continue to be able to come to you week by week through your kind donations, for which we humbly thank you. I realise times are extremely tough, so another way you can help us is to spread the word about PseudoPod. Tell others, tell friends, tell family, tell colleagues. Talk about us on social media. I hope you're well and staying safe. We'll be back next week with 5 Fridays During Lent by Christine Lucas. PseudoPod is part of Escape Artists Incorporated and is distributed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License. Theme music is used with the permission of Anders Manga. See you next week. Until then, PseudoPod knows from whence the fog appears.
It's a pseudopod. It's a big foot.
It's all about podcasts these days.